Welcome to Critical Role Demystified. I'm Mike Christensen, and this is the series where we break down the lessons we can learn as GMs and as players from episodes of Critical Role. Today we're tackling episode 40, Desperate Measures. As a reminder, these videos come out every other Thursday, but Patreon members who support me at $5 a month or more get these videos a day or two early and totally ad-free. No YouTube ads on those. So if that sounds appealing, check out the Patreon. For this episode, Sam is not able to join, but Ashley calls in from New York. Also, as a note, a bunch of the cast members leveled up after the last session, and Vex has multi-classed into Rogue. Laura apparently plays a lot of rogues or rogue-adjacent characters when she plays video games, so I think she's finally getting a chance to fulfill her original desire by dipping into Rogue. As the game opens, the heroes stumble through the portal in their tree and into the garden of their keep. And almost immediately, Matt switches the music back to battle music. He's keeping the intensity up from the end of the last episode. The party starts to usher their servants into the lower levels to get them underground and to the safest place they've got. But then they discover a gathering crowd of more than 50 people who fled Amon, just begging to be let in. So they also usher these refugees into the keep. One of the sky ships of Amon spirals out of the sky, one half of it in flames, and falls just behind the keep and crashes into the ground. This is such a fantastic detail and a great way to close a plot hole. We know Amon has sky ships and the nobles would try to flee, but we can clearly understand what a disastrous idea that would be, but Matt still shows the obvious consequence of what would definitely happen if dragons attacked a city that had access to flying ships. Boy, the things we have to figure out when we're GMing are truly wild sometimes. But Matt also uses this as a way to draw the party's attention to the skies, just in time to see the white dragon emerge from the smoke rising from Amon. It flies towards the keep and starts freezing the people who hadn't reached the keep yet. And it's initiative, so here are some highlights. Percy kicks off the fight by landing a natural 20 on the dragon, and manages to send the dragon crashing into the roof of the keep. Keyleth casts a fog cloud at around the height of the walls to hide the people in the courtyard from the dragon. But unfortunately, this is how the cast discovers that the ancient dragons have blindsight. What a bummer. Matt also lets this dragon's name slip as he's describing the dragon's turn. He refers to it as Voragal, but then basically says, "Oops, you'll learn that name shortly." Man, I struggle with this all the time. I'll either read the name of the creature's stat block, like Cobalt Dragon Shield, or I'll do what Matt did and slip the proper name of an NPC or a villain too early. I try to get around this by just writing down the names differently on the initiative sheet. Like in this case, I would try to remember to just write White Dragon on the initiative tracker instead of Voragal, because that's usually where this issue comes up when I'm reading off the name as it appears on the turn order. This approach also works if, for example, I have a bunch of different types of kobolds, because then I have to try to find ways to describe them differently, describe them as looking different, which actually helps bring them to life for the table. For example, the kobold with taped up glasses, the kobold with the hand axe, the kobold with the eye patch, things like that. But also, sometimes I don't remember to do that, and I just do what Matt did here. It's not a big deal, it's never broken a game, but if you can describe your NPCs and monsters in a way that matches how the player characters would perceive them and doesn't give out any extra information too soon, then that obviously helps with immersion. And like I've said many times, Matt is usually great at revealing names because he usually has a plan for how the name will be revealed dramatically. And we'll come back to that soon. Anyway, the white dragon breathes on the heroes, and Matt has to use a dice rolling app because it's 16d8 damage. Trinket gets knocked unconscious and frozen solid. Several civilians freeze and die, and many of the refugees who were running toward the keep have turned around and gone the other way. Probably for the best. Laura is also visibly upset and crying that Trinket is unconscious. Another example of how these cast members are deeply immersed in this game and this world on a level that is extremely rare in this hobby. Pike heals Trinket, which frees him from the ice. Sure, why not? It's as good a way to justify that as anything. The White Dragon uses its Frightful Presence feature, which makes most of the heroes frightened of the dragon. Mechanically, I mean, they're already pretty freaked out. It hits Grog twice with its claws and then gets a natural 20 to bite Pike. The cast is now starting to talk about whether they're running or fighting, but most of them actually can't run because they're under the effect of Frightful Presence and the dragon is in between them and the keep. Running away from the keep just leaves them exposed. Keyleth can't use transport via plants again today. So where could they even go? But we've talked about this before. When people talk about retreating, it's actually hard to get them to really start moving. Grog breaks the seal by picking up Pike, with her blessing, and running to the keep. You really do need somebody to be the first to retreat, and Travis is very good at being that person when the group needs it. This is also verified when Scanlan casts Fireball for the second time in a row. Matt is being very respectful and trying not to use Scanlan's spell slots, so Scanlan is just using his wand of fireballs throughout the fight. But when Scanlan's second fireball hits the dragon, Matt describes the relative lack of damage so far, and Travis is vindicated in his urge to retreat.
But the white dragon appears to still just be not really visibly hurting yet.
Yep, gotta go.
Oh, yeah. No.
It's
Gotta
not
go.
visibly hurting.
Gotta go.
But again, there's nowhere for them to run. And Matt knows this. And he has no desire to kill off his entire party. So at the exact moment when Matt is trying to indicate to his players that this dragon isn't too badly hurt and they should maybe think about clearing out, he also drops into another cinematic moment.
At this point in time, you guys hear a voice come ringing out from the north side towards where Amon is. A familiar voice that you've heard before that shouts out,
"Enough! You are not to linger! Follow the others!"
At which point you see the white dragon kind of glances over the shoulder and you hear the voice again say, "Vorugal!" And in a streak of smoke and red, the red dragon you saw that had perched itself in the center of the city just grapples onto the back of Vorugal and throws the dragon off the edge of the wall and goes tumbling to the south of the keep, out from the perspective.
So how much bigger is Vorugal?
Double the size?
Like, is he? How much bigger
It's
is
roughly
Vorugal?
double the size of
Double the
the
size.
white dragon Vorugal that you just battled.
Let's go fight that one.
So first, yeah, once again, Matt had a plan. He wasn't going to kill Vox Machina here. But also, once again, he had a plan for how this name would be revealed. We heard the red dragon shout the white dragon's name, Vorugal. The red dragon ignores the keep and flies back to Amon, and Vorugal begrudgingly leaves the keep and flies east, following the other two dragons. And sorry, but I do have to play this clip for a little bit longer to illustrate my next point.
As the red dragon returns towards the city, its voice is ringing out at a volume that, even at this distance, is being enhanced by some sort of arcane means, whether it wants to be heard. And as you can see now, as it hits over the far south walls of Iman, it shouts out once more,
"Hear me, insects! You that live, do so out of mercy. Fight or flee, and you forfeit that mercy. Know that your pitiful guardians brought this upon you. That blood is on their hands. Vengeance has been swift, and in its wake, a new age is upon you."
making its way towards the center of the city.
Be thankful, for until now your lives had no purpose, no meaning. Abandon your gods, your paltry convictions, for now you have a new purpose: to serve me!
And with that, you hear the clattering impact once more of the Cloudtop District as a half dozen buildings collapse under its weight as it slams into the center of what probably still stood tall in the middle of the city of Amon. You hear the crumbling wreckage echoing in the distance as it slides to a halt, and a couple of distant slamming sounds as it kind of makes its way into the central borough of where the palace once was. Quiet now takes the air as all the people are still standing frozen in fright of what they just saw, and slowly begin making their way into the keep, kind of whispering, shaking, crying under their breaths, the survivors that are not frozen in the center of Greyskull Keep's courtyard. What do you want to do?
Pee?
That is entirely viable.
Everyone, we need to go inside.
Yes.
Is this because of us?
Okay, so here's a rhetorical question. Between when the dragons attacked and this moment, what choices did the players actually have in front of them? Let's jump back to the last episode when the dragons first actually attacked. What choice did the party have? Fight or flee? Not much of a choice. As we discussed in the last episode, Matt clearly wanted Vox Machina to retreat. He just had to stack the deck so they would choose to do so because it had to be their choice. But it wasn't much of a decision. What about besides that? Maybe where would Keyleth take them with the transport via plant spell? That was a major choice. They could have just gone to Whitestone instead of retreating to the keep. And that actually would have been a challenge, because Matt clearly had a plan going into this session for how he would reveal the White Dragon's name and how the Red Dragon would lay out his demands for the people of Amon. But maybe Matt had a fallback for that, which might tie into how he reveals more information later in this episode. We'll talk about that in a bit. But what about in this session, in the first hour? Again, fight or flee, which is a non-choice posing as a choice. But now, finally, the cast understands the full scope of what they're dealing with. Well, almost. There's some more important exposition coming later in this episode. But for the first time now, they actually have choices. What do they want to do in the aftermath of this encounter? Now, this is by no means a bad thing. The past hour and a half of gameplay across these two episodes have been incredible D&D. But it's essentially been an extended cinematic sequence. And now, finally, now that the dragons aren't breathing down our heroes' necks, no pun intended, they can actually think, and talk, and debrief, and maybe even plan. And while their options in this moment are obviously limited by the spells they've already spent, like they can't flee to Whitestone right now, so no matter what, they're spending the night in the keep. But they can choose what to do with the refugees. They can plan for what they're going to do in the morning. They can actually try to figure out what's going on and what's next. Because that's how the rest of this arc is going to work. They're going to have to make the decisions about where to go and what to do. And I actually think that this is why Matt doesn't call for a break here. Remember, Travis just joked that he was wanting to wet himself. Well, we're at 1 hour and 17 minutes into the episode, and Matt could have totally called for a break right now. It would actually make perfect sense. But he doesn't. Because my guess is, he doesn't want them walking away from the table feeling like this. And that's a really smart decision, and not one that I would have thought of. But instead, he holds them and gives them a chance to react, to finally take meaningful actions for the first time in this new story arc. Like, yes, clearly we all think of the Chroma Conclave arc as beginning when Uriel gives his speech, or maybe a few minutes earlier when Vax ranted to Vex about how meaningless their recent missions have been. But this is actually where they can really start playing the game and making meaningful decisions. So in some sense, this is where the arc begins. I mean, it's not. There's no way the Chroma Conclave attack is not part of the Chroma Conclave arc, but hopefully you understand what I mean. Basically, everything we've seen so far was the opening cinematic. Now the game begins. Vex tries to heal some of the frozen people in the courtyard, but they're too far gone. They didn't have the hit points to survive the dragon's breath attack, so they crack and crumble as she touches them. Everybody files into the keep, and they start setting up beds in their chapel for the refugees to sleep for the night, and start making food. Grog takes Percy aside and tells him that the skull they found in General Krieg's house can grant a wish, but it will only work for people who have been touched by darkness. That's Percy, of course, and Grog, since Grog once housed the phylactery of a lich inside of his chest. Percy doesn't dismiss the idea entirely, but he does want the others with them as well, in case things go wrong, because they would be able to help bring Percy back from the brink, or deal with him if things go wrong. Grog agrees to bring down one other person, and Percy says Keyleth or Vax, whoever is less busy. Meanwhile, Pike casts Planar Ally and summons an angel to help them. She wants its help, but since there isn't an immediate battle in front of them, it'll cost 1,000 gold per hour and 10,000 gold per day the longer it's here. What a weird spell. So instead she commands it to repair the roof of the keep, since the White Dragon did crash into it earlier. And Matt describes how this helps bolster the spirits of the refugees who watch in amazement. Vex and Vax bandage survivors, and we get this wonderful scene.
I don't know what is going to happen in the following hours. Do not go far from me. If we are out of earshot, you are too far from me. Do not go far from me.
Do you think this is what... Do you think this is what Mother saw before she died?
Do not go far from me.
I won't, I swear.
We cut back to Percy, who, as soon as Grog left his workshop, he took out the skull and started talking to it to find out what it was offering. And Taliesin receives a long whisper, and whispers some questions back for more answers. And we at one point overhear Taliesin ask, "At what price?" which is not a great sign. Grog asks Vax to come with him to talk to Percy about the skull, and says Percy asked for just one person, which is obviously not what happened. Vax tells Vex to follow in 5 minutes if he's not back by then, presumably because he doesn't trust this skull as far as he can throw Grog. And Vex decides to cast Hunter's Mark on Grog. She's not even sure why she does it, but just as a precaution. Grog feels something, but fails to identify what it was. And as a note, this is where Matt finally calls for a break, because they've actually had a chance to start responding to the situation that they found themselves in. When they jump back into the game, we get a fantastic scene. Timecodes are on screen if you want to watch the whole thing, because it rules. Honestly, the entire back half of this episode rules. Percy tells Vax that he doesn't like this offer of a wish, because he doesn't think that they're being given the full terms of the deal. Also, every time they interact with the skull, Matt reminds them that it's not human or elven, it's elongated. It's something they don't recognize, and reminds them about the gem in the eye. They speak more with the entity inside the skull, and a face with slits instead of a nose appears in the gem and speaks with them. It claims it will grant them a wish if they break its prison. When asked who he was, he says it's been too long and he doesn't remember. Vax obviously does not trust this either, but Grog is really committed to this idea. He thinks this is the solution. But Percy is especially worried that freeing this entity could be far worse than the 4 dragons outside, so bare minimum, someone should identify this skull and figure out who this dude is or was. Grog cannot imagine how anything could be worse than the 4 dragons they can barely land a hit on, but if I can editorialize a little bit, Percy can always imagine a worst-case scenario. He's very good at that. Vax suggests that tomorrow they take everyone to Vasselheim and go try to seek the help of the gods and their worshippers. Percy waves a hand and the skull vanishes. He actually just casts a minor illusion to disguise it and make it seem like it was no longer there, but this proves his point. If you don't know the terms, don't take the deal. Percy is a walking reminder of the consequences of dabbling with unknown magic. At this point, Vex comes downstairs, and Percy calls Pike and Keyleth down as well, and Vax goes out of the room to talk to them first, to ask Pike to get through to Grog. Percy secretly tucks the skull behind his back. But Grog closes the door and demands the skull.
Who's in the room right now?
Right now, it's just you, Percy, and Vex.
I shut the door.
Okay. Grog walks over and closes the door.
I want that skull. I want it now.
This is about the skull, then.
Yeah, Percy's trying to do some fucked up shit with the skull.
Wait, did you close the door?
I did.
So we're locked out?
He didn't lock it.
You guys
can't
haven't
lock
gotten
it.
there yet. This hasn't happened yet. You guys are
You
still
lock
walking
it,
down the
can't lock
stairs.
No, but I stand in front of it. I want the skull. Right now.
Let me see your sword.
No, you don't want to see the sword.
Oh, shit.
Let's talk a little bit about conflict between players. We've talked about it before on this channel, but this is a moment where the cast of Critical Role and their characters clearly feel differently about what's going on. The cast knows and trusts each other. They're clearly excited about the possibility that Percy and Grog might literally come to blows over this. But the characters are, kind of freaking out about this. And ultimately, this is the lesson we can take away from this moment. Playing conflict between your characters is tricky. That's not to say that you shouldn't do it, but I do think it requires trust. You need to be able to have an in-character argument and not do the things that happen in most real-world arguments. You need to not drift off topic and bring up other crap and use this as an opportunity to list all the things you don't like about this player, or even just their character. You need to make sure that the other players know that you, as a player, don't want to mess with their agency over their own characters, even if your character kind of would want that. You need to give people the space to respond to what you're doing. And honestly, let me know if you want me to go into further depth into all of these topics, because I'm sure I could make a whole video about this. But also, you need some element of trust. You need to know that this player isn't going to screw with you. You need to know that they're a generous scene partner. Scenes like this are tough to pull off in new groups or with players who haven't been as gracious at the table. But thankfully, this cast does have a lot of love and trust for each other, and that's vital for this scene. Also, Laura asks to roll an insight check to see if they're themselves and if their intentions are good. And Matt does what he did during the Briarwood arc. He rolls on behalf of the other players. And I've thought about this moment for 7 years.
Can I insight check them to see who is fucking with who and who has
Good luck.
who has better intentions right now?
Oh, man.
Insight check.
Double insight
It's like
check?
finding a needle in a haystack.
Okay, the gold one is for Percy, and the thorny one is for Grog.
Naturally.
Whoa! Those are good for both of them, motherfucker!
Roll.
The gold one is a 27 for
Okay.
Percy, and 15 plus 8, what is
15 plus 8 is naturally 23.
23 for Grog.
Okay, I rolled it for both of them. And what was one of those a natural 20?
No, but one of them
Okay.
is 27 and 23.
Right,
were my
27, 23.
numbers.
Okay, good. Looking at them both, they're still very guarded, and you're unable to really.
Both of them? Seriously, Matt?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Seriously?
I mean, you're. It doesn't absolve any of your suspicion by any means, but they're both locked in this intense kind of stare off, and you in the center of it as you dart back and forth to try and see any give, any twitch, anything that would possibly show an ounce of what is going on in their heads. It's the best poker faces you've seen on either of them in a while.
Are we at the door yet?
So, Matt definitely just rolled 2 natural 20s, right? Look at his face. Maybe he's reacting to Laura, but I don't think so. The fact that he doesn't just say they both believe they're right, he says they've got great poker faces. He essentially says, you can't read them, which means you failed the insight check. And he asked if one of Laura's rolls was a natural 20, which is also a dead giveaway. And when he's questioned on it, he looks back down at his dice. Dude definitely rolled 2 natural 20s. Now, of course, the group will later realize that rules as written, natural 20s aren't automatic successes, but that's not really the point. The point is, I figured it out. Nobody else is talking about this, but I figured it out. Anyway, they continue to debate this subject. Vex asks the figure in the skull what his deal is and if he's Vecna, and he says no, Vecna is gone, but he at least knew who Vecna was, and these days he's fallen into even deeper obscurity, so this fella's probably pretty old. Pike tries to push the door open, but Grog is standing in the way. Keyleth desperately wants to cast Hold Person on Percy and Grog, but she can't see into the room yet. Vax calls Scanlan down, and I've seen some people speculate that things would never have gotten this far if Sam was at the table. I don't know if that's true, but it does feel true. Grog and Percy don't trust each other with the skull. Grog thinks Percy is hoarding more dark magic and lying about not taking the deal, or at least not wanting to take the deal, and Percy thinks Grog's plan is sound, but they need a lot more information first. They agree to let Vex hold the skull. And then, not long after, as the debate continues, everything pops off.
I bum rush Vex.
I'm using quick draw.
What?
Initiative rolls from both of you guys.
Yeah!
Does this mean the door flies open?
The door flies open.
Just a moment.
This is all seconds. This is happening in seconds.
Percy fires a warning shot at Grog and pulls Vex and the skull out of the path of Grog's rush. Grog pivots and tackles Percy and goes to block Vex with his back to her, keeping Percy away from her. Pike tries to insight check Grog, and we get this exchange.
I want to get rid of the dragons. Now.
So you gather that he's coming from a place that a simple mind is looking for a simple solution to a complex problem.
Right here, Matt.
Burn. Burn.
Flames are...
I'm just saying that's the best way that she can discern your demeanor right now.
Pike tries to get Grog to hand over Craven Edge since she presumably suspects it's having an impact on his personality. Percy just grabs a fire poker and prepares to swing if Grog comes for him again. And then Grog yanks the skull out of Vex's hands and tries to spike it on the ground. As in, he's trying to release the creature so he can get a wish. Grog is legitimately about to release this weird, unknown being into the world. That's going to happen. Nothing can intervene at this point.
I would like to spike the skull.
Okay.
Oh.
Go ahead and make a strength check.
You're just gonna.
No!
Oh!
What are the fucking chances?
God.
For one.
Yes.
As you reach up at the apex of your throw, you look down.
I don't believe it.
Your eyes catch
I
Pike.
don't fucking believe it.
Your eyes catch Pike, and they're in that brief moment of slow motion as you reach up, you see her face, this look of complete, heartbreaking disappointment. And it, just like that, it shakes you in a way that you didn't expect, and as you go through the motion you'd already anticipated, your brain's already wandered, and in doing so, you slam it half-heartedly, and it just kind of bounces and skids across the ground over by where Keyleth is.
If Travis hadn't rolled a 1, the rest of this campaign may have played out very differently. Vex grabs the skull and runs out of the room, and Vax steps into the door to cover her escape, daggers in hand. Keyleth finally casts Hold Person on Grog, Vex, and Percy, but only Percy fails the save. And Keyleth finally gets something off of her chest.
Everyone stop! Why are we fighting? We just watched our city burn to the ground! What are we fighting over?
They're not fighting. They're trying to protect the skull.
What does this look like? What does this look like to you?
A statue garden?
Everyone get in Percy's workshop and we're gonna talk this out!
You don't know what's happening.
I would if any of my fucking party would for once tell me something! You all didn't tell me the full fucking story of when we been back in General Krieg's house, and now look happened! Look what happened because you assholes aren't communicating! Shut up, Percy! This is because of us, and you all know it is. Let's figure this out!
Now, again, Keyleth is operating under the assumption that they are directly responsible for the dragon attack because they went into Brimscythe's horde. And as we discussed in previous installments of this series, she seems to think that there was something the other players know that they didn't tell her, some ulterior motive going back into Grieg's house. I don't know what she thinks they know. Maybe she misheard something, or maybe she just doesn't understand how half the cast was just so willing to risk their status as heroes just for some extra gold. Much like Vax, she is not happy about the mission to go back into Krieg's house. And it seems like, from Keyleth's perspective, if their greed truly triggered 4 dragon attacks on the city, then they should have known better. They knew the house was dangerous and went in anyway. And if this is the consequence, then they have to bear that responsibility. And of course, she's right. The group just isn't communicating. Grog and Percy don't want different things. Percy's okay using the skull if they know they can trust whatever's inside. A simple identify spell is all he's looking for. At this point, their butler, Erwin, comes to report that they have 2 new guests who just teleported into the keep. Allura and a dwarf they haven't met before, a spellcaster named Elementalist Drake Thunderbrand. Matt actually reveals after the game that he set a timer for when Allura and Drake were going to arrive, and the fact that it happened when it did was just pure coincidence. Vex asks Erwin to send these 2 down to the basement.
And Allura rushes in, kind of muttering under her breath. I was just in Whitestone, and I had a terrible feeling come over me, and all my teleportation sigils within the city were suddenly severed. Both my tower and the Lyceum. I had to manually teleport us here, as it was the only place I really had enough familiarity with, far enough away from the city in case something bad had happened. I hope you don't mind.
Now, that's not how the teleportation circle spell works. You don't know what happens to the other spell circles, but it's a great excuse to give Allura a bad vibe, and a reason for her to come back to Amon. And specifically for her to do so by casting Teleport and coming to the keep. And also, this is set up for another cool thing Matt is going to do in a moment. We'll come back to that. They tell Allura what happened to Amon, that Uriel stepped down, which she did not know was going to happen, though he'd been talking about it, and that 4 old dragons descended immediately afterwards. They ask her to identify the relic they found, and she casts Identify and reveals that the skull belonged to a Githyanki, something that is probably familiar to those of you who've been playing Baldur's Gate 3 this month. This is a soul gem containing somebody who is very old. Since Githyanki are typically evil, or at least have a very different sense of morality, she doesn't advise them to take the wish. She asks for details about the dragons, and she's actually heard of Voragol. It seems that the first dragon they killed, the white dragon they fought at their very first Winter's Crest festival, was one of Voragol's children. And when they tell her that the red dragon said, "You can thank the guardians of the city for this attack," or whatever it was that he said, well, she goes pale. Because she thinks the red dragon was talking about her and her old team, which included Lady Kima and Drake Thunderbrand, and some others who did not survive.
This dragon, it's been called many names, but the one that it has taken is Thordak, the Cinder King.
Now we finally have all 4 names of all 4 dragons. And I told you in the last episode that there was something cool going on with these names. Well, first, if you break down the component pieces and look at how the days of the week were named, Thordak essentially means Thursday. It's a cute little detail, since Is It Thursday Yet is Matt's sign-off at the end of every episode. But also, we got the names in this order: Raishan, Umbrasyl, Voragol, and Thordak. Now, James D'Amato, host of the One Shot and Campaign podcasts, used to have an advice show called Critical Success. And in one episode, he specifically said that if you give your players a list of names or locations or MacGuffins or whatever, the players will almost always remember the first and the last entries better than they'll remember the ones in the middle. And as the campaign plays out, Raishan will be an extremely significant character for reasons we'll get into in a few episodes. And Thordak is obviously the big boss who is sitting on top of Mon. And whether or not Matt was thinking about it this way, I do think it's noteworthy that Matt made the most significant dragons the first and last to be introduced. Also, I mentioned earlier that Matt probably had a plan for revealing Voragol's and Thordak's names in case the party went straight to Whitestone instead of retreating to the keep. Well, notice which 2 dragons Allura has heard of. And she was in Whitestone. And notice how quickly she was able to identify who these dragons are. I suspect if they'd gone back to Whitestone and asked Allura about these dragons, she could have given them the information, the names and backgrounds of Voragol and Thordak. Speaking of which, Allura runs down Thordak's CV. He ruled half of Marquette for centuries. There it is again, we're getting another reference to Marquette. He tried to attack the city of Ank'Harel, but lost and flew away wounded and apparently died, disappearing for centuries. But 15 years ago, Allura and her team discovered that he had lived and had been ruling the island of Viscan in the Lucidian Ocean south of Taldore. And now he was working his way north. He'd already destroyed the towns of Port Udal and Byrodin. Oh, and Byrodin, by the way, is where Vex and Vax grew up, where their mother lived, where their mother died, killed in a dragon attack. Thordak killed Vex and Vax's mother.
We traveled to investigate, but arrived to find this creature destroying everything surrounding the glade pools. Port Udar, gone. Byrodin, a smouldering ruin.
Because, see, Laura and Liam gave their backstory to Matt, and it included a dragon attack, but no details beyond that. But Matt filled in the gaps and used it as part of the hook for this adventure, for the Chroma Conclave arc. Anyway, Allura details how her team failed to defeat Thordak and his army of lizard folk, so they used magic to seal him away in the Plane of Fire. And isn't it interesting that Winter's Crest just passed, and the borders between planes are at their thinnest at Winter's Crest? After all, that's when the Briarwoods were scheduled to perform their ritual, and it seems they weren't the only ones who planned to take advantage of that time. But also, at this point, Percy/Taliesin wonders if this is their fault that he got free from the fire plane. After all, they did see him there. Allura clarifies that Thordak couldn't leave the plane. He was bound to a soul anchor, a piece of heart crystal from a primordial fire titan. Now, that sounds an awful lot like the stone Keyleth got for completing her Armente visit to Pyra, which she smashed in order to get her fiery hands. And now she thinks it's her fault. And Matt has to jump in and clarify, as Allura, that the soul anchor was huge. It was 15 or 20 feet wide. But here's the thing. The cast has proposed 3 different ways for this to be their fault. By breaking into General Krieg's house, by visiting Pyra, and by using the fire rock thing that Keyleth got. And call me crazy, but I kind of feel like the cast was excited by the idea that this was their fault. I mean, they're emotional and they're haunted by the idea that this was their fault, but they also seem to keep looking for reasons to be responsible. After all, if they're not, then it was just a total coincidence that they went back to Krieg's house less than 36 hours before Krieg's buddies descended on the city. It's a coincidence that they saw Thordak in the fireplane. And while, yeah, that was actually all foreshadowing to this event, and I don't think it would necessarily work for every group, I think there's a case to be made that it would have been right for this group, and the Chroma Conclave actually should have been their fault. Because that would have made this story even more personal. Can you imagine if the dragon that killed Vex and Vax's mother had been released because of Vex's greed in Krieg's house? Or if it had been released because of Keyleth's rite of passage? Now, I don't think that Matt should have changed his plans when the cast started reacting this way. He made the right choice. He's got a plan for the Soul Anchor, he's got a plan for Pyra, he's got a backstory already for how Allura and Kima are connected to Thordak. But also, there is an argument that it should have been more tied to something Vox Machina did, because that makes for a more compelling story, and that's something his players care a lot about. And sure enough, they circle back to another one of their arguments, that this is their fault.
Would you consider us guardians of this city?
One of many. I believe the Guardians.
No.
Is this because of us?
Laura looks you dead on and says, the only Guardians that Thordak would know of would be the ones that sent him away to that plane 15 years ago. This is my fault.
It's not true. If we are to solve this situation, we cannot hide the truth. I killed Krieg. We killed Krieg. I finished Krieg.
Krieg was a dragon, Allura. A blue dragon.
We stumbled upon his lair, reached through his home in Amon, through magical means. We found his lair.
He attacked us.
And I
reach out and I grab Vax's hand.
And we survived.
When it happened, he had 4 stones, 4 orbs in his lair. They saw us. They spoke out to us.
They threatened us.
When was this? Was this...
Many years ago.
Maybe 2 years ago.
not all that long ago.
It was right after we got to Amon.
It's been over a year at least. Well, it's taken them that long at least to free Thordak. Means this has probably been in the works for quite some time. If we do share this responsibility, I assure you it weighs heavily on me more than it does you. But right now we need all the allies we can gather.
Matt is really trying to reassure the party that this isn't their fault, but I don't really think that's what they want. I think they want to bear the responsibility because they want this to be tied into the consequences of their previous actions. We know Liam seems to like it when one plot segues into another, and there was a potential for that here. And obviously Marisha's opinion on that subject is pretty clear at this point. But I don't know, I also see it in Taliesin and Laura. They kind of feel like, I mean, shouldn't it be their fault? Isn't that more dramatic? Isn't that more personal? That being said, as it stands, it's already pretty personal. Vex and Vax lost a mother to Thordak, and Keyleth is getting pretty worried about her sister tribe at Pyra, considering there's a portal there to the Fire Plane. But of course, Matt has another bomb to drop. After all, the heroes don't even know the full scale of the problem yet, pun intended. But they're about to learn just how bad things are.
We don't know what happened to Uriel. We didn't see.
We need to take stock of who we can consider friends that are still around. Any not allies right now. That should be our first order of business, if anything. And her face drops again. I just lost my connection with Western.
That's why Matt gave Allura the ability to know the status of the teleportation circles she's memorized. Not just so that she could know that something bad happened in Amon, but also so she would know that Western got hit as well. Last week I put out a video about the stories that wipe away the support structure so the heroes have to rise up without the aid of systems of power that would normally be their allies. And that's what's happening here as well. If Amon and Western were razed to the ground, then it seems that Vox Machina can no longer call upon the help of all those wizards who work in the palaces and libraries. And there's more developments coming. Allura reassures them that this is not total annihilation. After all, Thordak wouldn't have offered mercy or left anyone alive if he didn't want survivors. With her exclusive access to the Game Master's insight into the situation, Allura theorizes that the dragons want worshippers. It's a bit inelegant for an NPC to tell the player characters, no, you're wrong, here's the actual situation that you've misread, take it from me, I wasn't even there. But honestly, sometimes it's a necessary evil. Every decision the party makes going forward is going to be affected by their understanding of the situation. If they think these dragons are trying to destroy the world, they're going to spread bad intel, and they're going to do this wrong. They kind of need to understand that this isn't an extermination, it's just a conquest. Well, just a conquest, you know what I mean. And again, while it's a little heavy-handed for Allura to lay it out this way, it's useful, because now Vox Machina knows what they're working with.
I want to kill that dragon. Or I want to die trying.
I will.
Keyleth scries on the fire Ashari and sees a ruin. Tents burned, bodies charred, the forest flattened, the rift to the elemental plane wide open with imps and elementals bleeding out of it. This is unquestionably where Thordak emerged into the material plane, and it's a disaster zone. Keyleth is emotionally distraught. Her tribe failed. Their whole goal is to stop exactly things like this from happening, and they failed. But Allura basically talks her down and says that they will take down the dragons who did this, and Keyleth can't abandon hope.
I'm a firm believer that there's always a way to victory, if we're smart about it, and we're quick about it. Now, I think we should look for survivors. Gather those we know can rally to our cause. In Amon and beyond. What say you?
Aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
We either stand now or we might as well be dead.
So we're definitely not gonna wish on this skull then? Yeah.
I would recommend against.
Yeah, I stand.
Very well. Let us prepare the fall of the Chroma Conclave. Together. And that's where we'll end our session for tonight.
Fucking A.
Hey guys, D&D's fun!
D&D will never be fun again. Everything's ruined.
Hey, we're all cows!
Welcome to the new story arc.
Oh,
Yay!
Wow.
Oh my god, so much snot.
Yeah. Oh man.
Oh, everything.
Hey, he even just said it. The new story arc basically started when the cast started being able to make meaningful choices, which they were finally able to do in this episode. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks with episode 41, In Ruins, when the party goes back into Amon to try to find some allies and some intel. In the meantime, I have other videos coming out every Monday and Thursday, and between now and the next episode, we're actually going to do a lot of cool things. We're going to talk about how to create backstories like the ones on Critical Role, and then we're going to take those backstories and create character-centric plot arcs like Matt Mercer's. But first, we're going to create some characters to use for those exercises. So on Monday, we're going to use my favorite random generator for D&D character ideas and create an entire adventuring party. So if all that sounds cool to you, then make sure to subscribe. Please also support me on Patreon. If we can get to 1,000 patrons a month, then we can take this series weekly, which I am really looking forward to doing. You can also join my Discord server. We've got a bunch of awesome people who talk about each of the new videos as they come out. We also get some great conversations there. And follow me on Twitch to see my live streams. If you want to run a game with some scary dragons in it, then check out this video about 2 great resources you could use to put awesome dragons into your game. Until next time, play fair and have fun.